All right, everyone. Interesting article here, actually. Link in the description, archived, of course, talking about Doge and musing over whether it's going to be a success or not. Trying to sort of overlap it with the early Reagan period. Of course, Ronald Reagan brought in a team of people to try to look into government spending in an advisory capacity to recommend cuts to the budget. And it was not particularly a success at the time. He did manage to freeze federal budgets for a couple of years. That was a success. But beyond that, as far as actually cutting programs and stuff like that, it didn't really pan out because it was just in an advisory capacity. I would point out that the composition of Congress changes over time. It's much like with Donald Trump and his wall. He had to get a federal court to tell him, yes, indeed, the commander-in-chief is allowed to take defense spending that's already been non-allocated anything and is just part of a general pool to defend the border of the United States. Ta-da! It took him several years to actually get that decision. I would like to point out, though, Doge, I think, is a success already, because part of it is effectively nothing more than a rope-a-dope for the liberal movement. You can't really oppose the existence of Doge, because otherwise you're admitting to your voters, hey, I don't give a shit about government efficiency and accountability. That's not going to work. I suspect that unipartyists will attempt to undermine it by deliberately not listening to its advice, but I would point out that there's a fundamental difference, beyond the rope-a-dope already being a success, by the way. Robert Reich is salty over it for a reason. Beyond that, you have an entirely different kind of team this time than you had in 1982. Elon Musk is from outside the Beltway. He's the richest man in the fucking world and a general success story. Ramaswamy is a young charismatic, also very wealthy. By the way, I think he has like $100 million or some crazy amount. These people are not the kind of suit and tie bureaucrats that were brought in before. And so I think that Doge ultimately will be a success. Now, to what degree is it going to be a success? I do not expect, unfortunately, them to be able to trim $2 trillion from the federal budget. While that would be great, in fact, trim the whole fucking thing and just let the federal government collapse, things would go on probably better than before. While I would like that to happen, I don't expect that level of success. What I expect is, and this has been mused over by people even in the legacy media, what I think that their goal is effectively is to look through federal budgets and possibly state budgets as well. And they're going to look at line after line, what was the money spent on? Okay, here's this chunk of money, mandatory spending. What was it actually allocated to? And you're going to find a bunch of instances of shrimp on a treadmill and stuff like that. And when the general public sees that, because this is the tech era, so these are some of the magnates of the tech world. When that is exposed to the public, I think that the idea is to use public outcry to pressure politicians to actually make some meaningful changes. In the end, it won't be $2 trillion, sadly. But could it be $100 billion? Yeah, I think that would probably be in the ballpark of what they could achieve. And that's meaningful, by the way. We've gotten to the point where when something costs $10 billion, people say, whew, that was a cheap program. You've got all this money being allocated to things that don't really make sense. Javier Milei, for example, has an article just today talking about some of the wasteful spending and shit that he's managed to cut down in Argentina. By the way, stabilizing the economy very well in the process. And, I mean, just fucking look up Javier Milei right now on RCP and look at that fucking article. I link not in the description, sadly. I've got that at the top of the docket. And it shows that you can have that sort of success. Apparently there was some rule in Argentina that the Presidente, El Presidente, was allowed to become the godfather of the seventh born child of any family. Or something like that. It's inexplicable. It makes no sense. Why is it even on the books? That piece of paper has to be, stored in triplicate and on microfilm, apparently, as well. And then spread around to every office saying, yes, indeed, oh, you just had a seventh kid. We're gonna ring up Javier Milei to ask if he's going to be the godfather. I'm the godfather. But, Doge is already a success. I mean, the shock to the system that it's already delivered, I think, was the point. The government efficiency side of it, I think, will be generally successful. Not at the level that Elon Musk is saying that it might be. Not nearly at that level. But the shock to the political system and the airing out of the dirty laundry of the federal government to the public, I think, was the whole point. This didn't happen back during the Reagan administration. You didn't have public internet at the time. It was the early 1980s. It was an entirely different story. So I tend to disagree with this article because you're effectively attempting to match up apples and oranges. Are they both fruits? Yes. Are they the same fruit? No. Just try to use oranges for what you would use apples for. Generally, you will fail, for example. The Reagan administration was hampered by obstruction in an era where Ronald Reagan could do the bully pulpit thing, go before the public, do the old Gipper shtick and tell a few jokes and sort of entrance the audience. But there was no wider connection within communication to really spread around the information that he wanted to spread around. So somebody wasn't watching the cable news at that time. They didn't see him speaking. The Gipper was therefore effectively for them silent. Trump does not have this problem. Elon Musk does not have this problem. We have a 15-second news cycle at this point. It will be very, very easy for them to go through because they're not a government agency, so they're not really constrained by regulation. Simply going through the tax code, the federal regulations, all of the studies that have been financed and things like that, military spending, and being able to choose a few of the real good ones and simply air it out to the public like they do every fiscal year on Fox News, for example, but to a much wider audience, much more quickly, with much more public interaction with that material, I think that would be a success. I think the public will be astonished to find what their money is going towards. Oh my God, $500 million to study pizza in space or something like that. This sort of thing happens all the time. And this is part of mandatory spending too. What happens is that money is allocated to an agency or in general to some purpose, and then bureaucrats basically choose what to do with that. It's not all to pay people's pensions or their salaries or anything like that. A lot of it is frivolous spending. You could probably axe 30% of the non-discretionary spending in the country, and nobody would even notice the difference other than their taxes would go down. That would be the best case scenario. It's not going to be the scenario that you get, but an attempt is at least being made. I think that Doge in the end will be remembered as a very successful trolling meme as well, because again, there's no way that you can really attack it. It's a win-win situation to even incept it. That's about all. Peace out.